I really didn't want to stop. It's such an amazing performance, and there was so much humor, and I love those side glances to the ensemble. So Danielle, take it away. You are a student moderator today, so please introduce our guest.
Hi, everyone. We're really excited to have Mr. Richard O'Neill with us today. He's a renowned violist, among other things. And for the first half of this lecture, he's going to talk a little bit about his life. And then in the second half, we're going to transition into the question and answer portion. So please take it away. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Such an honor to meet with you all today, and thank you, Danielle and Chris, for hosting me and moderating. You have had such an amazing array of guest speakers, probably the most active visionary people imaginable, and it's an honor to be part of your year of these wonderful discussions. Today, I think maybe we can begin our discussion with this program I was invited to talk on that was in South Korea last November. It's a lecture series, and it was also an amazing array of panelists from all around the world, organized by the Korean government. But maybe Danielle and Chris, you can share the section that you had shown me at the beginning.
I come from a multicultural family in America. My mother, Lee Bok-sun, was adopted into the United States after the Korean War, after she was orphaned by my American grandparents, Perry and Mildred O'Neill. They raised my mother and myself as if we were their own family. Growing up in a small rural area of the United States gave me a firsthand perspective into the microcosm that is America, to be more specific, small town America. Racism in the United States has always been and is still a deep-rooted problem. For me, I was bullied and teased for my appearance, told to go back to my country, and most hurtful of all, insulted vicariously through my mother for her mental condition. It was hard not to feel like I was fundamentally different and not in a good way. I sought refuge and solace in my family, my studies, and music. Learning to play the violin at a young age. In music, I found a place where I belonged. There were no judgments, misunderstandings, or hate, just pure communication. No matter how I was feeling, once I closed my eyes and I started making music, I could lose myself and escape. Within this year, I am witnessing a similar situation that I faced as a child during this pandemic. Harsh rhetoric, discrimination, and hate crimes against Asians have skyrocketed across the globe. For some, Asians are to blame for the coronavirus. Rather than viewing science, some have turned to hysteria and unsubstantiated claims. Instead of uniting and coming up with a global solution to the virus, we have fractured, devolving into blame and rage. Higher infection rates, and all at a horrific human cost. As a young man and aspiring musician from limited means, there were many moments of my life that I lived in great doubt, where the risk of complete failure was ever present. The worldwide global music community is facing a similar challenge today. Perched at the top of a dangerous precipice, frozen with severe restrictions and paralyzing parameters, some of our most beloved institutions are facing the existential crisis of our time, and we run the risk of losing even more of our beloved art institutions that have served and inspired countless generations. For my fellow artists, I would ask of you, What can you do for your audience during this challenging time when our prescribed way of communicating has been forbidden? How can we keep music relevant, powerful, and perhaps most importantly, for everyone to enjoy? How can we keep making music while being silenced? And for our beloved, dear audience, I would ask for all of those moments that your souls were comforted, spirits lifted, imaginations set free. What can you do now to support those artists whom have shown you a glimpse of the sublime? Can you imagine your life without music? There is a real possibility that some of the artists that you cherish and enjoy might not make it through this crisis. So what do the coronavirus and music have in common? Well, one commonality is that both affirm the interconnectedness of all beings, our inextricable bonds to one another. We are a global community, and what affects one of us affects all of us. Music is our universal language, and COVID is our shared burden. How will we overcome this virus together?
Okay. Thank you for that. Such powerful words that have become even more relevant in our time that we're facing today.
I'm sorry, Chris. Am I unmuted now? That was around Thanksgiving. And I had no idea, none of us had any idea how pervasive this problem would become. And it's not just in New York City or Los Angeles, it's everywhere. I live in Boulder, Colorado, where I'm zooming in today, where I'm a resident with the Takacs Quartet at CU Boulder. Boulder is a very green community, so I try to run and not drive my car as much as I can. But 4 days ago, I was running home and somebody took the time to roll down the window and yell some incredibly offensive expletives. And it hurt. It was shocking, you know, and for a community that just 3 weeks ago, we had a terrible shooting and tragedy. And usually these moments of tragedy bring communities together to have that sort of thing where you're like, I don't know if I want to run to school tomorrow because I don't want to, you know, have something happen, you know, and it's like happens everywhere. And I'm sure I can't see everyone here in the room, but all people of color, we've had, this is not just a 2021 problem. This is a lifelong problem, but it's seemingly right now it's amplified. But what can I say? I mean, I think with a lot of you in this room, all of you, you're outliers. You're very, very smart, bright young individuals from a diverse background, and you're all incredibly brilliant just to be sitting here listening to me gab away. But it's a very interesting thing, one's self-identity and how one rises above challenges and how one sort of chooses how to run their life, how apply their energies. And for me, because I felt my initial reaction to my childhood discrimination was to withdraw within and feel isolated and alone. And luckily, because of a very rich and luxurious life full of incredibly brilliant people and loving, accepting environments and countless wonderful opportunities, I've been able to evolve out of my shell and hopefully try to return some of the love that was given to me to other people that also have been going through challenging times. I had a youth orchestra in South Korea for many years that tried to give equal opportunities to minority children living in South Korea. Many of whom were discriminated against when they were in elementary school in the most terrible way, and also suffered from the fact that a lot of them, because they were growing up in another country, from their parents, they couldn't even communicate with their parents effectively because they were learning Korean and they identified as Korean, and their parents were of another identity. So yeah, it's a lot of things that are happening right now, and I guess as musicians, I think an article was sent to you, but just to briefly say, I didn't really have the opportunity to meet my biological father, but I did have the opportunity to connect with his family after decades of separation and after his death. And my aunt, Cheryl, is a paraeducator in high school in Seattle, Washington, where both sides of my family are from. And she once told me something very, very meaningful. She said, because she works with people that have a lot of different challenges, and a lot of times people that can't even really communicate directly what they feel. And she said, Richard, everyone has their way of communicating. You just have to learn how to listen to what they're saying. And I might add to that, as a musician and as a human being, I think if we listen with our heart and we really take the time, it's a very true statement. I think in this day and age where everyone is, the art of communication and empathy and reaching out has been so strained because of this pandemic, and also because of the use of social media and technology in general. I think that art of just trying to listen with your heart is it's a hard thing. But as a musician, I think it's essential. I think if we can't understand each other and we don't understand what this collective experience is about, what is it all for? It's notes on a page. By somebody that wrote it 200 years ago, but that's irrelevant. That means nothing to many people. But if there's a message, if there's always something that's being communicated, I think that's incredibly important. Chris and Danielle, I don't want to keep on going down this path unless if we want to. Do you have a question for me, or would you like me to continue?
Go ahead, Daniel.
Can you please continue? But I can also ask a question, kind of a segue. You mentioned, with this pandemic, it's been very difficult for a lot of people, especially with all this hateful rhetoric going on, which has only really intensified in the past few months, really, and gotten even more difficult and very awful. But maybe turning a little bit from that, I was wondering how what you were doing during the pandemic, and maybe how you are helping those children in South Korea in your orchestra, and maybe getting involved on campus at UCLA and other schools.
Well, to start off maybe more from almost the end of this academic year, I've been teaching in person now the entire year. CU Boulder has been in person, which if you would have asked me literally last August, I would have this is craziness. Because as you know, it's a small community here, and we have neighbors, and we have a lot of elderly people in this community, and it's a college town. So you have tens of thousands of students convene anywhere, and then you try to separate them and contain people. It was a challenge of challenges. So this year, looking back, because we're wrapping things up here in about a week, it's been very meaningful because it's taken. The shout out probably first should go to the students. They have been incredible here. They have gone from online to in class, back to online, depending on the caseloads, which have really fluctuated. And then in addition to everything else that's happening in the world, including our tragic shooting less than a month ago, our students have been incredibly resilient and incredibly flexible and adaptable. And they've been going nonstop, all semester because we eliminated spring break because we didn't want people traveling back home and then coming back. And so they've been going since late January until now. So it's with no break. I mean, 2 wellness days. We call them wellness days, but that's the worst terminology ever. So shout out to our students and our faculty. I mean, on the other side, I mean, here I am. I mean, Chris and I are on the other side of this sort of equation. It's really hard to teach sometimes when you yourself don't know what's happening. As a teacher, you want to lead by example, give courage and challenge people. But from our perspective, I mean, my slate was completely wiped. I mean, this is my debut year with the Takacs Quartet, which is one of the world's great string quartets. It's the 46th year, and I took this job 2 years ago and had all these incredible, completely packed calendar of debuts in all the music capitals of the world, nonstop touring. And as you all know, come last March, April, it sort of, it was almost like a dry erase board. Somebody just took one swipe and it was gone. So let's rewind back to how my personal feelings. I mean, March and April, I was down. I was really down. I'm not going to lie. I felt sidelined. I felt sort of useless. I mean, here's somebody that's, you live for bringing and sharing music with other people, and you train your whole life to do that for those special moments where you get on stage and you do your thing and your audience can experience music real time. And to have that, it'd be one thing if I was given some time, like, oh, Richard, in 2 months you won't have any concerts and it will be for X amount of time and then it will come back again. I would have been okay with that. But as you all know, it wasn't like that. It was like everything's canceled and no one knows when it's going to come back. And no one knows how many people are going to get sick, and no one knows what the governments are going to do. And it was just, it was a dark time for me. And international travel, my passport, I was worried about I'd have to renew my passport early because I have an extended amount of pages, but my pages were almost full and I still had 6 years to go. Well, that's been solved because international travel has been halted and even domestic travel. So a lot of the projects dearest to my heart, I haven't even been able to go to because I can't travel. So it's all of these things. I mean, I think the one not comforting thing, but it's you could be Yo-Yo Ma, you could be an undergrad student at Juilliard. It doesn't matter. Everyone's in the same boat. No one can perform. All the venues are closed. And now we're sort of entering a period where I think with the vaccinations, knock on wood, things are getting a little bit better. But it's been, personally for me, it was probably one of the darkest years of my life.
Yes, it was definitely very difficult because, especially with this pandemic, well, I've not been in any other pandemics, but it's for this indefinite amount of time. We just have to kind of wait and listen, and there's a lot of unknowns, as you mentioned, with that. Especially, what are we going to do? How are all these people going to get better? How are we going to overcome this and get better as a nation, and as the entire world. If anybody has any questions, please raise your hand. If nobody else has any questions, I have another one. Okay, I'll ask another question. So this is, I'm going to ask you about your recent Grammy win, which must be very exciting, especially because this year has been so difficult. I was wondering, what it was like to win a Grammy Award for a solo instrumental, and I guess can you just talk us through that?
Danielle, well, it was really, you have the lows in life and you have the highs, and it was definitely a high that was accentuated by how low things had been. But a little bit of backstory, a lot of my life has been, I don't get things on the first try, improbable wins, and my first nomination was 15 years ago when I was a student at Juilliard, and I flew out to LA, got a hotel, got all dressed up, walked the red carpet, and I lost. And then my second nomination was about a decade ago, and I did the same thing. I was living in LA at that point, so it was just drove across town, got all dressed up, and I lost. So it was sort of like this third time around, I'm 42, and I was sort of like, I don't know, maybe I'll just sit this one out. At the time, I was like, there's no way I'm going to get on a plane and fly to LA and sit in a room full of people, during this pandemic. And luckily enough, the Recording Academy, because LA was probably at that point in January was probably one of the worst places in the United States for infection. They delayed the ceremony till March. So I was like, which is sort of a good thing and sort of a bad thing, because I don't know how you guys are like when you're waiting for your entrance exam into Cornell, or like your acceptance into Cornell, or when you're moving on, or you're waiting for something, you want it to be over, right? You don't want to wait forever. You just want it to be done. So I was like, oh gosh, I have to wait till, the Ides of March. That's never a good thing. So, when I tuned in from home and there was a big blizzard and my internet went out, and I was like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? I don't have 4-wheel drive on my car. I'll have to run into school and then show up at the Grammys, and I'll be a disaster. But luckily my internet came back on. They were running 30 minutes early. So I logged on for my time, and there's like, you're up. And it was like, okay, I guess there's no time. And then when they announced my name, honestly speaking, I almost lost it. I really almost lost it, because it was just, there's been so much in my life. And my mom's been really sick with cancer, and just a lot of stuff. And it's like life. It just, you can't box it up and put it in little compartments. It just all sort of came when they announced my name as like some positive stuff. So it was really good. And what was really, really fun is basically after they announced it, I got to go in a green room with all the other winners, which was hilarious and entertaining. There's some big personalities at the Grammys, yeah, I don't know if you know Chick Corea, but he passed away this year. He's one of the great musicians of our time, a legend, and his wife Gail was in the green room. So I got to chat with her, and it was nice. It was nice. And what made it perfect, besides all the texts and messages from my family and from friends all over the world, was after I was done with all of the PR stuff and the green room and your interviews. I had 2 feet of snow outside, so I just put on my, I took off my my nice shirt and I put on my coat and I went and I shoveled snow for 30 minutes with my neighbors, which is it's the first time the whole neighborhood has actually gotten together, because we're not, gotten together, but, I've seen my neighbors because we've been hiding from each other because of this pandemic. But it was nice to see young and old shoveling the snow. And that was sort of a perfect way to end that.
All right, I'm going to start poking students to ask questions, but while I do that, and I'll poke people. So if I poke you, please ask a question. I have a couple of questions. So maybe we can switch directions a little bit. I would love to learn more about the Hello Orchestra, the youth orchestra initiative that you have in South Korea. How that started, what it means to you, whether it's still going, if there's a way for the Cornell Orchestra members to help. We would love to hear more about it. Richard, you're muted.
Oh, sorry, technology. In 2012, I got this phone call from a producer at NBC Television, which is one of the 3 big television stations in South Korea. And this producer, producer Lee, she was a force. And I remember meeting her at the Seoul Finance Center, and she invited me for tea, and she immediately started talking about how, she's this big TV producer, a creative director at one of the big TV stations. So her job is to come up with content. But she said, Richard, I fell into a terrible, terrible depression. And I couldn't really find my way out. And I started playing the cello. I just started taking lessons to play the cello, and slowly that process helped me get out of this really terrible depression. And I don't need to tell any but of you in the room. I mean, I think a lot of us seek the arts. I mean, it's especially for comfort or solace, and in unexplainable times we go to music because it's the perfect comfort. And so she said, Richard, that of itself is fine, but racism here in South Korea is terrible. With South Korea has become economically much more prosperous. It's boomed. There's been a rise of immigrants. A lot of people from Southeast Asia that move here for opportunity. And there's also a lot of interracial marriages, primarily in, I don't want to oversimplify this, but in Korea, a lot of times when you marry, it's the marriage of family. So you don't want to, I think you don't want to marry, and this is not my personal feeling, but you want to marry somebody that's a similar status, whatever that means to you. So a lot of these country farmers, the people that live in the rural areas, no city girl wants to marry that guy. What does he have to offer me? So a lot of times there's mail order arranged marriages from other countries, and that is what it is. But the children often, if they're mixed children, when they go to school, these mixed children are treated like less than human. I mean, the way, first of all, because sometimes their Korean is like mine. I mean, my Korean's it's terrible. I didn't grow up speaking it. I learned in my 20s. It's people can tell, right? They can smell it for miles that I don't speak. And little kids will basically they'll torment these kids and call them all sorts of names and bully them in the bathroom and do all sorts of horrible things. And this is when he was 5 years old. So it's like I was listening to all this and I was like, that just sounds just so awful and gross, and sign me up, I'll do what I can. So we collected 24 children from this it's this small town called Ansan, which is a sort of, no, I wouldn't say a rough town, but it's not, it's kind of closer to the water, and it has it's most, unfortunately, it's infamous because there was a terrible tragedy where the high school, this group of a whole group of high school class went on this boat trip with their class, and the boat it hasn't really been confirmed why it flipped over, but it flipped over and it killed all these children. Like the captain and all the crew jumped off and left these children to drown. And it was probably it was like the 9/11 of Korea. It was so tragic. And those wounds won't heal probably for a long time. But that's what the community is very known for. And me spending a lot of time there, some parts of the town are kind of rough. And I mean, maybe not rough in the sense that, you know, because there are no guns in Korea, you won't get shot, but it's just sort of, it's a hard place to grow up. And a lot of the kids that I met, I sort of, because I have no degree in child psychology, or I've never done any courses, and I've just taught at the university level for, you know, and so these are little kids. And first of all, I don't know if any of you taught elementary school kids, but it's tough. I mean, it's like, I mean, it's just like the energy, first of all, the energy discrepancy between somebody in their 30s and then somebody like when they're 5. I mean, and then you put together like 24 of them. Oh my gosh, I was like bruised and beaten and insulted, and like I would leave every day like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. This is like, I don't know how anybody teaches public school. But anyways, I was given the assignment to teach all 24 of these kids how to play violin, violoncello. And in 3 months, the deal was that I had a music festival at the time, where every June was that I would get the kids up to a level that they could play on a public paid concert of my own in a 3,500 seat hall, which was packed with people. And so you know how that is. I mean, you have a concert, you don't want, and people pay money, it's not a charity thing. You have to get these kids ready. And it was a huge struggle, but we got the kids somehow to do incredibly well. And thanks to the teachers and thanks to the parents. I mean, the project went on for a year. This was all a film for television. And I got to really, I got to know each one of the kids and their families and hear of their struggles and get have a much deeper life because of it. And at the end of the year, the government, the president's office called me, and they asked me if one of the ministers asked me out for dinner, and I went out, and they asked me very directly what I'd like, and I said, well, please fund my orchestra. So that the orchestra went on for many years. It's still part of the Dream Orchestra. It was absorbed by El Sistema. There's a global branch, and because of that, we were able to add woodwinds and percussion, and it was really probably, if I look back on my life so far, it's probably the best thing that I've done, or I've been a part of. To be kids that age are so, they're like a sponge. You know, you give them attention, you give them love, you tell them that it's okay to be who you are, and that's a beautiful thing, and don't let anybody else tell you anything else. And here's a musical instrument, and sure, it doesn't sound great at the beginning when you scratch away, but if you practice and you give it some time and some dedication, you'll get better at it. And maybe most of all, you get to hang out with your friends and you can all be together. And it was just it was really I saw a lot of the kids, some of them were physically abused at home. Some of them really had their parents left them. They're raised by the single grandma. I mean, it was really, it resonated very deeply with me because I mean, I didn't have, you know, like a sort of, when I was growing up, I didn't have a nuclear family of a mommy and a daddy. And I would look around and like, am I the only one, you know, that does, I don't have a dad, you know, I feel like abject or something. Um, and it was just really interesting to get to a point in my life and then see that, you know, as you spin around the circle of life to look back to that side and say, you know, you can really make a difference. I mean, and the amount of energy you spend on the young, I think is so disproportionate. I mean, I think you never know the seeds that you plant. I mean, and positivity and acceptance, and um, it's made me appreciate my elementary school teachers more. And part of the great thing with the Grammy actually is a lot of my, I got to thank a lot of my elementary school teachers because I'm from a very small town in Washington and they all heard about it, so they all contacted me and I got to thank them. And it made me realize, yeah, this circle is, we all spin around it, and it's interesting how we change, but then we realize things about ourselves from looking around the circle and seeing parts of ourselves from both people that are older than us, and people that are younger.
I'm going to poke Jonah for a question, but I just want to point out to we have a mentor program at Cornell, so members of the orchestra are mentoring fourth and fifth graders in the local elementary school. So they meet with them in this era of Zoom for weekly Zoom sessions. And some of them are, I'm going to meet with them after this session. And last week's big question was, how do I teach them how to tune over Zoom? So, so they are living that reality of, you know, trying to level their energies from a collegiate student level to a fourth grader and fifth grader. So our student mentors are, and I feel like they feel like, wait, why am I doing this? I have midterms, I have prelims, but what you just shared, I think would be so much more, so powerful to our mentors that in fact, the time that they're spending, the time that they're giving to their mentees are so valuable, and that they're making a huge difference in a young person's life.
You know, I can't tell you how many dramatic episodes I had with tuning, like broken cellos. I mean, a lot of these student instruments, the strings are really incredibly cheap. So you try to tune it and they slip. And then like somebody drops the cello and it shatters and then they cry and you're like, oh, just tuning takes like an hour. I mean, tuning everybody's instrument, it's really, I can't imagine not being in the same room because those pegs, it's hard to, unless the pegs are really, I got some strings donated actually after a while. I went to one of my friends in New York. I was like, you need to give me better strings because these strings, I don't know where they're from, but they're like chicken coop wire. They're literally like, they cut your fingers and they don't stick. So, but along the lines of giving your time and I think teaching, if I look back, teaching is not an altruistic thing at all. I think teaching is a very selfish thing. I mean, the teacher, I think, often gets more than the student. I mean, the sense of gratification of you know, a lot of you know, I spent 10 years at UCLA, and you know, now when I travel the world now, I've been away from UCLA about 5 years, but when you get taken out by one of your students that says, thank you for teaching me because now I can do what I do because of you. I mean, I could die after that comment. I mean, that's a great feeling, you know, that you had the ability to directly, tangibly help someone's potentialize. I mean, it really, in truth, I think that's everything, right? Is everyone has potential. And the great tragedy on earth is that everyone's not allowed to potentialize because of either structural problems or personal things. It stops people from potentializing. The amount of genius on this planet is unheard of. It's just, there's not enough sometimes infrastructure to allow that genius to manifest. But when you see it manifest in a very personal way, that's what life's about. I can't imagine a better use of your energy. I mean, as a performer, you strive for excellence because you never know when or who, when they hear your music through recording or performance, what it will do for people. In that darkened room full of strangers, you're giving your love wholesale, you're giving music. And that's very powerful, and that's worth living an entire life for. Sure, but as a teacher, you can, I think the payoff is you see it much more quickly. I mean, your time and your dedication to your students and what you can offer, because I had a very direct line. I met people's parents, and the parents told me what the kids were going through. And that alone was just like a lot to, it was a lot to hold. But I mean, every moment of your time helping people, the young, it's so worth it. And I'm so glad, Chris, that you're advocating for that, because public school, we don't have public music education anymore. I mean, when I was a kid, there were still some programs that, but the arts are the first thing to get cut. People feel like it's an unnecessary expenditure for school districts, and that to me is such a horrible waste. I mean, it's a waste. I mean, to not give kids the outlet for this, everything is about tangible. It has to be about results and numbers and SAT scores. It's like, why, if there's no sensitivity or ability to think, I don't know, maybe draw applications through different processes. I mean, I think that's the great thing about the arts. You can make all these sort of interesting amalgamations because you have the ability to think outside the box and not always have to think, I need a logical conclusion I need to have. I think that's very important in life, but I mean, the left brain, right brain thing. But I think this elimination of music education is really, I mean, if I had billions of dollars or I had lobbyists in the government, that would be what one I would spend a lifetime. I mean, the government could make a difference right now if they wanted to, but it's just people have lost that. They don't think it's necessary. So it's all of you will do a better job than my generation. I think my generation, I mean, music is, it's going to survive always. I mean, especially what we do, but our relevance of what we do and how we speak to people and how inclusive we are. I mean, even in my circle, there's so many people that are, because we strive for excellence, we push people away. And I that always really bothers me, because I'm from a small little rural town in Washington State, from a non-musical background. And because I was surrounded by greatness, both by the content of what I was studying and by the people that practiced it, I was able to evolve. And I think everyone should be given that opportunity. I think it shouldn't be just for the people that can afford it or the people that grew up in big cities with music programs. It should be for everybody.
Yeah. So Jonah, you have a question?
Yeah. So this is something that it's sort of deviating in topic a little from what we've been talking about, but this is something I was curious about as a violist, and I know several others are in this call as well. I was wondering if you could talk a little more about your instruments. I understand they're very old in Italian.
Your name's Jonah? Yes. Well, my main concert instrument of the moment was my teacher's, and it is from the 1600s. It's an old Italian fiddle, and he used it for his entire career. And before that, it was in the Philadelphia Orchestra, and before that, it was one of the collection instruments for the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia. And it has a little brand on near the chin rest. There's a little Curtis filla in it. So it's a beautiful old Italian viola. But what makes it really special for me is that it was the person that got me to start playing the viola. It was I have another nice old Italian viola that I had made a large part of my career on, but he called me up. I was playing at the University of Washington in Seattle, and he called me up and said, Richard, you're sort of in the area. Can you drive out to my farm where I learned chamber music, which is really close to my hometown? And can you take my viola? I had a stroke. I can't play it anymore, and I want it to be played. And I was like, well, that's very nice of you, but I have a very nice old viola already. And he's like, no, I insist. So I did. I drove out. He hadn't played it. I don't know. It'd been sitting in a closet, some farmhouse closets. It was just like, had these horrible old, talk about strings. It had these old gut strings that just sounded like it had a cold. It was like, it didn't want to respond. It was just like lethargic. It's like, wow, this is great. So I took it back to Seattle, put on some new Tomastic strings, took it in the hall, and I played 2 or 3 notes at Meany Theater in the UW, and people were like, what is that thing? That thing sounds incredible. And so long story short, I took that viola, and I've had it for about 4 years now. I've done all my recordings and all my concerts on it. But I have two nice older instruments. The quartet has a very nice instrument for me, which I don't think I'm going to keep, because 3 is just ridiculous. And then I have a modern instrument by Robert Brewer Young that that's on permanent loan to students. It helped one of my students win a job in China, so he's playing on it in one of their orchestras, and someday hopefully he'll give it back to me, and so I can lend it out again. But I'm really lucky. I mean, instruments are really a sore sticking point for me, because I grew up borrowing instruments because my family had no money. So I mean, I had to borrow my teacher's instruments, and it wasn't until maybe my late 20s I actually owned my own instrument. It took me a long time to own my own instrument. I was just borrowing things and using foundation, because these string instruments, they're rare and they're used as art pieces, and I think that's tragedy. It's really, I think the good thing about it is that a lot of the modern instruments out there now are really incredibly good and equal to a lot of the great old Italians. What do you play on?
Nothing too special.
How big is your viola?
It's 16 inches.
That's great. So like about 40 centimeters. And is it wide, or is it sort of more wide around the lower and the upper bout, or is it more?
Yeah, it's fairly wide, but the neck is actually pretty narrow. It's a little closer to a violin in some ways, like the neck, but yeah.
And is it scroll light, or is it heavy, so it feels easy to hold?
It's pretty light, yeah.
I used to think when I was in school, like I had borrowed this gas bar copy that was like 18 inches, and it was like I was out to here, and I used to think that was the only sort of sound you could have as violas. But actually, I mean, for the last 15 years, I've only played on about 16 and a quarter, 16-inch violas, because I find that's the perfect size. You have to take care of your body as violas, because I think once you injure yourself, this is also an instrument. So if you hurt yourself playing one of those brontosaurus size violas, I think it's really it's no good. So I'm glad you're playing on a manageable size.
I know Alyssa actually has a question for you. Alyssa, you could unmute, that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to circle back again to music education, and you talked about kind of breaking down financial barriers, but a lot of people feel like classical music isn't for them, or that it's like something separate. So I just wanted to know what your experience with that has been.
It was maybe it was a while back, and I had this very, very fancy chamber orchestra come from Vienna with a very fancy conductor, and to my festival in South Korea in June. And we were having a very serious discussion about music. And the conductor turns to me. It's like, Richard, I'm very glad that you've invited me to your festival. And it's great to see all these hundreds, thousands of people here. But I honestly wish there was I'd rather have 30 people rather than 3,000 people. And those 30 people in the audience know what you're doing. And rather than this whole thing, and I was sort of taken aback. I mean, on many levels, but I think that conversation is really a reflection of sort of the arts today, in at least in what we do. I think you have people that, I mean, it's hard not to put music on a pedestal because it's so great, right? It's really great. And I think for a lot of us, I mean, we really we put it all on the line to be the best musicians we can. And it means everything to us. And we want the quality. We want to be not the best, but we want to always make ourselves better at what we do. I think one thing that COVID has really shown us is that, there's a lot of competition for our attention, for our audience's attention these days, right? I mean, with social media, with all the different streaming platforms, with YouTube, there's just so much out there for people. It's almost like an infinite amount, not infinite, but very, very large amount of stuff to take in. And so our old format, like, well, do you want to come to a 2-hour concert at 8 p.m. on Friday at this hall and pay $80 or maybe $150 and sit at the back? And it's like, I don't know, a lot of this sort of way of living has changed, I think. I've seen it happen over my lifetime. I mean, I remember when, even in my small community, you'd have subscriptions to the community orchestra or the ballet or something. I don't think people do that anymore. It's harder. I mean, it's very expensive. And more importantly, I think the time commitment is really hard for a lot of people to carve out that much time to maybe find a sitter to put the kids, and then go to a concert or people, let's say, even your peers. I mean, what could you do to get all of your peers to come to your concerts? I mean, maybe they'll come because they know you, but if you don't know somebody and you just say, come to my concert, will they? I mean, I think a lot of times I think we just have to really think outside the box going forward. It's really hard. I think one of the principles is to always put music first, and to always strive for excellence. But at the same time, if we don't challenge ourselves to reach out and communicate and make ourselves relevant, then how is this going to be around for our children's children? I mean, how is it going to, so I think programming, which you've probably been talking a lot about this year. I mean, you've had some of my 3 favorite composers, Jessie Montgomery. I mean, she's unbelievable. And one of our grad quartets here at CU Boulder, the Evalis Quartet, their mission is to actually play something of a living composer every concert. And I think that's great. And they've played actually whole programs of all of the people you've had on your lecture series, which is really, I think that's definitely a step in the right direction. Representation is a very, very difficult subject, and I don't know how to address that, honestly, because sometimes people say if people see people that look like them, then they're more inclined to want to do something, and I think that is very pertinent. And I hope that happens more and more. That we that is, as it's a very that we. Representation, I think, is important, but it's often a very nuanced thing. Communities, it's a complicated subject. But I'm of the firm camp that art is for all. Art is not for the few. Spoken from somebody that really, if you would have asked me early on in life, I had no idea who these people were. But you should open the door and show people things. And if you don't have an open mind as a performer or as a presenter, why would you expect your audience to have an open mind? I think you should always, that's the beauty of music. There's no, I think one of the most beautiful things about music is that you sit a room full of strangers in a room before COVID, and you dim the lights and you play music to them. It doesn't matter who or when it was written. You play music, and each one of those people in the room will get something different, totally different. And that's the beauty of it. Everyone, depending, doesn't matter who they are or their state of consciousness, they'll get what they want from it. And I think where else in our world do we get something like that? Where this nonverbal, pure communication, direct communication, but specific to everyone. I mean, that's such a special thing. And I think that's something worth fighting for, to get people in that room. And I think that's been one of the challenges in my life, at least in Korea, was to get people, how do you say, butts and seats. It's sort of like, get them in the hall. And my approach, what I did for my festival in Korea for many years, was to carpet bomb, to take all the media, the luxury of the media that I had, and just television, whatever, get people to come into the hall. But once they come into the hall, only program stuff that I believe in, and only play it to the level that I expect. It doesn't matter where you are, everywhere is Carnegie Hall. This mentality, oh, I'm playing for something in the middle of nowhere. No, you play the same way, you play with this utmost integrity, no matter, every time you touch the instrument, you don't know who's there, and anybody, you do your best. And I think that formula worked for about 13 years for me. We got a lot of people, we created sort of this generation of people that grew with it. So I knew, because when I programmed really, really challenging, really, really sort of intellectually rigorous and not particularly commercially viable programs, we had a good core audience, about 500-600 people that would come. So I mean, it's not the thousands of people that are screaming in the hall, but it was a devoted community of people that would come to everything. So I think to get your audience to trust you is the number one thing. I think, first of all, to believe in yourself and believe in the music you play, but to get people to trust in your programming and trust in you.
Thank you. And I think we have a question from Christine that I'm going to ask. And you really like to communicate and share this universal language with everyone. If you weren't a musician, this is her question, what would you have done instead?
I probably would have gone into social work. I think my grandparents, my mom's adopted parents, and the people that raised me, the O'Neills, were I don't know how to describe them, but they just really gave everything they had to other people. And we had 36 foster children before they adopted my mom, and a lot of the foster children they had were at the time, they were either war objectors to the Vietnam War, or they had kicked out of home, all sorts of people. It just, the door was open. And I think I grew up with two, until I was about 5, two boys that had Down syndrome. And they were in their 30s, and I was very, very young. But going back to what I was saying about, you have to listen to people, and you really learn very quickly when you're that people really, they have their way of communicating, and it was very interesting to see that this sort of practice. And I was very grateful to have my my grandparents there. And it's so hard to know, you deal with the sublime, you deal with arts, you deal with these very lofty things. But at the end of the day, you have to plow the fields, and, you have to keep it real. You have to be human, and I think that's always been a not a guilt thing for me, but like, what am I doing in a tangible way? Like a doctor is helping to save people's lives every day, and a social worker, they're in a very real way, they're trying to make a difference. And I always thought that actually, I probably don't know if I have the inner strength to do that. I mean, I think a lot of people that are involved in the medical professions, really, they have to have this incredible courage. Um, I don't have the smarts like a lot of you to go into medicine. I mean, that's a very special, rarefied thing. But and I hate blood, so I would be a very terrible doctor. Um, but yeah, I think social. There's so much to be done. There's so much to do, and so many people that they get run over in society that get some children. I mean foster children. I mean, or people. I mean, that to me is the worst. I mean, I think that everyone should be given the chance at the beginning, to potentialize and feel loved, and like the world is a generous and a forgiving and giving place, and to see that that's just not the reality. A lot of kids have a terrible beginning, and to me, in my very limited experience, to see that, I mean, that manifests in such a way that, that if we invested more at the beginning of people, people's lives, maybe some of these other problems we have would be different. We could stop some of these other manifestations of things. But I'm getting in way over my head. A lot of you probably study, the real world effects of good things. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a tractor driver, because outside of my our place in Sequim, Washington, and out in the boonies, there was this humongous field of about 80 acres of alfalfa. And that alfalfa, you grow alfalfa to feed cows. There's a lot of dairy in Washington at the time. And you harvest the alfalfa, and then you can ferment it under these big tarps, and it sort of preserves it for the winter. And I used to call it cow kimchi, because it smells like wine, because the alfalfa, it's a really pungent smell. But I used to look at that tractor every day, and I was like, that would be a really wonderful way to live. It's just to be in that big tractor and to work the land. And I'm still very attached to that part of the world. And maybe someday, when some of the craziness of my life calms down, I'll go back to more of where I came from.
Well, Richard, I think we could spend a couple hours, but we have come to the end of the hour, and some of our students have to jump to another class. So why don't we bring it to a close? Let's have everybody turn their videos on, and I always take a Zoom snapshot, Photoshop of all of our students smiling and finally getting to see each other in this time that we're all kind of separated. So, Richard, thank you so much for spending time with us. Danielle, thank you for moderating as a student moderator. Everybody, thank you for your wonderful questions. All right, I'm going to take 3 pictures. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. If you have more questions, I think Richard maybe he has 10 more minutes just to hang on if you're too shy to ask your question. But I'm going to stop the recording.